All right. Well, welcome everybody to the session 2 of Care Farming Network's three-part webinar series for care farms. I'm sorry, I'm Kate Mudge. I am the co-director of Care Farming Network. And also on the webinar from CFN today is Sarah Sorcy and Andrea Barnhart. And joining us as guest presenter is Becca Roe from Red Wiggler Care Farm. If you didn't make it to session 1, or even if you did, session 1 of this series really talked about naming impact and defining terminology.
At the farm at 8 a.m.
Thank you for muting. So we talked about terminology and naming impact. Today, what we're actually going to focus more closely on is how to capture and measure data without feeling overwhelmed. Can I ask if people can still see the slide presentation? All right, sorry. How about now? Great. Odd. I don't know what happened there.
Looks good, Kate.
Thank you. So just one thing to note here that this series is really meant for a whole wide swath of people. If you have little or no experience in care farming, or if you have been an established care farmer for years and understand the concepts, we really want this to be able to be adapted to suit wherever you are in your care farming journey. This webinar is going to be recorded. It's going to be shared with everybody who registered for the webinar. We are going to have our session 3 next week as well. So in the chat, there will be a link to register for that. And there's also for part 1, we have that available for purchase for $10 if you didn't get to see it. If you enjoyed today, session 1 will really help ground you in what we're covering today. Before we move into this, the way it's going to flow is we'll share with you information. Becca is going to be presenting and sharing information from Red Wiggler's perspective. And then we are going to have some question and answer towards the end, about 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll get to them in the Q&A or answer them if they are needing to be answered right away. All right, so kicking things off. In session 1, again, we defined what impact actually means for care farms, and we learned to name what matters. And so today, we are tackling this next question. How do you collect information without adding a lot more hours to your week or extra work to your plate? And before we get started, just a quick definition of how CFN defines care farming. And that is that care farming uses therapeutic farming to promote health, well-being, and belonging. We often share this slide in presentations as it shows a really nice overview of the benefits of care farming. Clearly, there are physical health benefits and mental health benefits, increased confidence, sense of purpose, belonging and social connection, improved well-being, and mental health, and especially community inclusion for people who often are feeling excluded. And care farms serve a really wide range of populations. So we know that there are care farmers with intellectual and developmental disabilities, veterans, trauma survivors, people in recovery. The benefits on this slide are really meant to show you all of the different ways that farms operate and who they serve. And this diversity is part of what makes care farming sometimes difficult to fit into a single box, and part of what we really hope that this series helps you with. So this slide is from session 1 and just a quick primer for those that weren't there or a reminder of what we talked about. Today's session is going to help you collect data on outcomes, not just the outputs. And that's the changes that participants experience, not just the numbers that you count. I'll bring your attention down to this impact, which is we're getting to what is the bigger, long-term difference that we're seeing whenever we're deciding on what data to collect and what that looks like. This is the change that your farm contributes. And it answers this question of so what? Because of your care farm, what difference is there in the world, in participants, to your staff, to your program, to your funders? And it can be really hard to measure, and it's really important to be able to articulate. So here's something that we know to be true. You're running a farm, and there's a lot of work to be done. And oftentimes, some of that work is paperwork or sitting behind the desk. And your participants might require a lot of support that makes it difficult to focus on data collection and measuring things. And so many of the tools that are out there were not necessarily designed with care farms in mind. Care farming is a relatively new concept, right? So data collection, unfortunately, either doesn't happen or you're doing it and it's just kind of inconsistent, or you're doing it to check the boxes and it might not get used or used fully. So what we're talking about today is really kind of what low burden data collection looks like. And when we say low burden, what we mean is that there can be useful data that doesn't always require extensive analysis and a clipboard or a certified researcher or hours of weekly entry input. But it does require intention. And the goal is to capture what is already happening, not to create this parallel system on top of everything else. So today specifically, we're going to talk about kind of these three approaches that can really, we feel, fit into farm life schedules. And those are surveys, observation, and conversations. So we'll start with surveys. Surveys, quite simply put, are structured questions and they are asked with intention. And what can kind of make them different than from a generic questionnaire is that you're taking the same question and you're asking it twice, or potentially more than twice. For instance, you might ask the same question at intake with the participant, and same question 8 weeks later, and same question another 8 weeks later at completion. So you're able to see the change and not just a snapshot. So surveys are really built around what you want to know and include questions that are tied to your outcomes. And they're also written from participants' point of view, and they're including your participants' insights in their own words, using their own ratings. And it's important just to note that these surveys are not your assumptions about what they're doing. So noting here that 5 intentional questions beat 50 generic ones. Surveys can be really good for gauging how people rate or reflect on themselves. For instance, their mood, their confidence level, a sense of belonging, even a progress towards a goal. So we're going to be sharing throughout this webinar what we found to be some really helpful tools, most all of them free and accessible. You're going to receive this slide presentation too in your inbox afterwards. And within these slides, you click on that hyperlink and you're going to get to these tools. So here are 5 survey tools. I'm going to go through each one. So the WHO 5 Well-Being Index here. This is one of the most widely used well-being tools worldwide. It's free, it's publicly available, and it's been translated into 30 languages too. And what this does is it measures your overall mood or energy or interest in daily life over a period of time. You can see that it's 5 statements. You have this 6-point scale ranging from all of the time to at no time. And it kind of gives you a raw score of 25 and converts that into a percentage. If you're using this with somebody, it's going to take under 2 minutes to complete. So this tool is really good for kind of a quick pulse check, if you will, on how somebody's general well-being is at intake and progressing throughout a program. Another tool here, the UCLA 3-item loneliness scale. This is a rapid, validated tool, and it's used to measure subjective feelings of social isolation or lack of companionship. So it was adapted from a much larger, I think, 20-item version. Again, only takes 2 minutes to complete. An example here is of the work and social adjustment scale. What this measures is how much of a challenge it is that someone greets their day with, whether that's at work, home, or social activities, or in their relationships. And this kind of helps to understand the functional impact, going beyond mood. So it's useful to use along with another tool. As you can see, the formatting is 5 items. You've got a 9-point scale from not at all to very severely impaired. You combine scores between 0 and 40, and a lower score simply means better functioning. Similar to the other tools, 2 to 3 minutes. This example is of a goal-based outcome. So what it measures here is progress towards a participant's own personal goals. Again, this is going to be in their own words, and these can track any kinds of goals that matter to a participant. So it could track something like mental health and emotional well-being. So if you have already discussed with somebody what their goal is, and it's to manage their anxiety or build confidence, you're building these outcomes to their goal. It can also be used for skill development. In the case of care farming, perhaps learning a new farm task or using a tool independently. Can be used for social connections, such as building relationships with participants or staff. Can be used to record and track goals of independence and daily functioning. So maybe somebody would want a uh, um, skill to be built or a goal of traveling to the farm alone or following a routine. Can also help with vocational and career goals, building towards paid work, or maybe resume building, or your physical health. You know, what tasks on the farm are you able to complete and step up into? This is really ideal for person-centered tracking, and it's reflecting what is mattering to the person. This again is not a generic checklist. And so you start with something like this, the participant and staff or volunteer or job coach, you agree on 1 to 3 goals together. And then you're just rating the progress on a 0 to 10 scale at intake. Again, same question, same goals, measured. There's no fixed passing score on this. And the time to complete really is, besides taking the time to set the goals, you can use this pretty quickly at progress, like meetings to do progress at check-ins. You're going to see a little bit of an example on this when Becca is talking about her work at Red Wiggler. And this is the last of the surveys. We included the USDA Household Food Security Survey. Might feel a little weird to have this in care farming, but lots of farms out there are growing food. Food access, food security, or insecurity is important to care farms. So this is a 6-item short form. This is just measuring whether a household has consistent access to food. And it has 6 questions on it. This is just a snapshot of a couple of those 6. And you are asked.
Kate, I think your screen went away.
I'm seeing my screen. You're not seeing my slide?
I'm seeing it.
Oh,
Everyone thumbs up if you can see my slide.
oh, okay.
Okay. Are we good? All right. All right. So, sorry, where was I at? So this is just combining a score from 0 to 6. Higher scores are indicating lower food security. And this, again, could be really good for farms where food access or food sharing is part of your program's core outcomes. And it's especially relevant if the farm includes something like CSA shares or a partnership with a food pantry or shared meals. So it's tying directly the farm activity to a measurable outcome. Andrea, is my slide back? Weird. Okay. So weird. All right. So we've gone through some surveys. We're going to tackle observation, another methodology for gathering data and information. And the difference between observation as data and just having a sense of how someone's doing is that you are deciding ahead of time. Again, that word intentional comes in. You're deciding ahead of time what you are watching for, and you're going to record that the same way each time. And so this consistency is what turns your daily impression of something into something that you can actually track. It's a method that can include everyone. And for instance, a written survey might exclude a participant with, say, communication or cognitive barriers. But the beauty of observation is that you can observe anyone. So for a lot of farms, this might be the most accessible and more honest data you have because it's capturing what people are doing on the farm. So you're deciding ahead of time what you're looking for, and you're looking for that same behavior, same scale with that intentionality every time. So here are 3 tools that I'll briefly go over for observation. So this is a well-being and involvement scale. I think you pronounce it Leuven. I bet there's somebody on this webinar who might know better than me, but I'm calling it the Leuven Well-being and Involvement Scale. So this is measuring how at ease and engaged someone is during an activity and in the moment. So you would observe somebody for about 2 minutes, and then you score kind of 2 things separately. Their well-being, which would be their comfort or their ease in doing an activity, and then their involvement, which is their focus and their energy. And you score them on a 1 to 5. And this is actually originally developed for early childhood education. And it's now being more widely adapted for other care and support settings because the format is really simple to use. So this could be ideal for participants who show their experiences through behavior rather than words. It's also ideal for spotting the difference between someone who's just present versus really engaged in their work. We have here another tool, which is a skill progression checklist. And what I've done here is to kind of give you an outline of how this could be used in 2 different scenarios. So this example here is of a care farm that serves veterans. And in the first option, first category, you've got some structured routine. So the skill progression itself is the category of structured routine, and the skill that you'd be identifying and observing is, does the person arrive and start a morning task without any prompting? And you've decided some stages of observation. When they're introduced, staff, you're walking through this together. Then that person is around for a while, and now they're practicing. Maybe they only need a check-in in mid-morning. And they move towards more independence. So they can, for instance, muck the barn solo. And lastly, mentoring. That person gets so far along that they are going to be the ones helping a new veteran on the farm learn a routine. If you didn't want to measure structured routine and instead you wanted to measure something like team coordination, you might have a different skill. So you could lead a small work detail on a task, fix a fence or rotate some cows. And in those stages, again, you're introducing something, you're practicing it, you're moving on to being independent and then leading others. Becca is going to go into this a little bit more about how this looks at Red Wiggler. It's framed a little bit different with this skill progression from introduction to mastery, independence, and leadership. But I just wanted to name that these tools can be adapted to different farms based on the types of activities that you're doing and the populations that you are serving. So the third kind of methodology that we're going to be talking about is conversation. And this really is one of the most natural of the three methods because conversations, they're already happening on farms. So at pickup or during a task or an end of season check-in, this is very non-structured, but again, it's still intentional. It is out of these three, probably one of the lowest burden methods to start, but be forewarned, it's also one of the methodologies that is easiest to do poorly. How is it going gives you nothing trackable, right? But if you have the same three open questions asked ahead of everyone at the same point during the season, that is getting you somewhere and getting you information that you can learn from. So deciding your questions ahead of time, being consistent, and writing them down means that a conversation moves from being a chat through something that you can track with intention and capture and use. Here's 4 tools shared around conversation. So this is the most significant change. And this is what it captures. It captures stories of meaningful change in participants' own words without deciding in advance what is counting. So it's really just asking you to open a simple or ask a simple open-ended question periodically. And what's the most significant change that you've noticed for yourself this season? Or what's felt good about being here? You're deciding these questions ahead of time, and then you're collecting and reviewing the responses that you're hearing. And instead of measuring against any kind of fixed indicator, you're letting the story reveal why it matters. So it can surface things that you never really actually thought to ask directly. Time to complete, well, maybe a few minutes per story. But again, that follow-up and the intentionality, reviewing the stories as a group even, those can happen quarterly or seasonally when you're capturing them and using that to help prompt and dictate what your work will be in the future. And this is really ideal for capturing the so what of your work. It is sometimes best for exploring the kinds of changes that can be hard to put on a checklist, but are easier and more recognizable when you hear them in a story. Another tool is the talking mat. This is really good to give participants who might have some communication differences a more visual way to share their views, as it doesn't rely completely on spoken or written language. And a talking mat can be as simple as 3 sets of pictures. You have a topic and a set of options and a visual scale. Maybe I like it, I don't like it. And the participant would place those option symbols under the scale to show how they're feeling. This is good to break a big question into smaller visual pieces, giving people time to think, puts the participant in control of their own answer. Little bit longer sometimes to complete, maybe 5 to 10 minutes per topic. And again, for anyone on farm who might have some cognitive or communication or language differences, including nonverbal participants, they could oftentimes be excluded from a written or spoken data method entirely. So a tool here is the semi-structured interview example. And I've actually put this into an example of a care farm serving people who are in recovery. So here's some questions that could be drafted ahead of time and thought about. What is something about your routine here that's really feeling steady or grounding? Who's leaning on you? Who are you leaning on? What are you thinking about this week? What if somebody's getting ready to leave after their time at the farm? What do you want to carry off the farm? Notice the language choices here. Steady, grounding, handled differently. These are really deliberate and they avoid some of that clinical framing. The questions probe things like routine and coping and identity without having to name what all of those things are, like cravings, triggers, sobriety, or too much diagnostic language. So this is really meant to be keeping the conversation feeling like a normal check-in rather than a screening. And it mirrors the same principles that we talked about back in session 1. It's measuring the outcomes like belonging and self-efficacy, and not the diagnosis itself. And lastly, here we have photo voice. And this is really neat. It's a method where participants can take photos, and these photos represent their own experiences, and then they talk about what those photos mean to them. And this format can give participants, they can do it. You can use your phone, you can use a camera, maybe give a simple prompt, go take a photo of something that makes you feel proud on the farm. And then you put the photos together for discussion. Again, participants are very fully in the driver's seat here. They are choosing what is mattering enough to them to photograph. And their expression then becomes this data. You can take photos anytime. You can schedule short discussion sessions around them. And this can be really ideal for participants who are just communicating more easily through images than words, and for capturing things like pride and ownership and personal meaning that questions alone might miss. So halfway through, we've kind of looked at some 3 methodologies, different tools, examined those. And really what I think is so helpful is when you have somebody like Becca who is willing to come here and be like, hey, this is how we're doing it on our farm. And sharing what tools they're using, a little bit of the why, and giving some direction on the value of them. So I want to welcome Becca. Thank you for coming. Becca serves as program manager of Red Wiggler. And Becca, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you so much, Kate. And hi, everybody. I'm not going to look at your faces so I don't get nervous, but it's nice to know you're there. Yeah, I'm excited to put some of what we just talked about in context at Red Wiggler. And so just to start out, you've all may have heard of us, but to provide a bit more context about us, we are a care farm located in Germantown, Maryland, founded in 1996. And we cultivate belonging and well-being through care farming and community building. So we have currently 16 grower staff members with developmental and intellectual disabilities who work at the farm. We also have different programs, which I'll touch on. And part of Red Wiggler is the Care Farming Network. And this past winter, we refreshed our mission and vision and impact statement, I think, to ground us in this why, which I'll touch on a bit. But our new intended impact is that as a result of Red Wiggler's work, people connected to care farms experience belonging and well-being that equip them to make choices and define their own sense of purpose. Together, these create opportunities for people to shape a life of their own design. And so I think that that's a really important thing to keep, and that's what's been grounding us as we've been internally, organizationally, really thinking about what data we gather and how. So here's a lot of information. Sorry about all these words. I just wanted to start off with a survey of what and how we measure across our programs. This is not exhaustive. And I highlighted in bold specific tools that we use. So don't worry too much about the why and how we arrived at these measurement metrics and tools. But I hope that you can just see if you just skim the tools that we use, it's pretty simple. We're using a lot of Google Sheets, Google Forms. We're kind of transitioning from paper into digital forms through Google. The most fancy thing that we use here is a system called Airtable, which we literally just adopted this past spring, which is a sort of a spreadsheet interface tool that you use for data collection and visualization. And I'm not telling everyone to go out and get it, but it is something that we're trying out and seeing how it fits into our flow here. So I'm going to dive a lot deeper into the grower program in particular, and that's our supported employment program. So when I say growers, I'm talking about part-time farm staff members who are also program participants here. But in addition to our grower program, we have a community engagement program where we have education groups and volunteers at the farm and events at the farm. And we also have a harvest share program where we share the harvest through our CSA, as well as food assistance providers in Maryland. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here. Again, this information will be shared, so I'm not just going to blather on. But I do, before I move on, or ask Kate to move on for me, I do just want to say a quick note on the why, which is not the purpose of this particular session, but we have over the years sort of refined in conversation with funders and donors what information is useful for them as we look to the landscape of keeping our nonprofit sustainable and alive, and also lots of internal conversations during the off season about what data is important to us, how we're using it. And so it's very easy. I just want to say it's easy to get stuck in your ways or your preferences for how you collect information and what you collect. So it is important to kind of have road stops along the road where you're kind of looking around and you're kind of doing a survey or an audit of what you do, because you may realize that you are doing things that funders don't care about anymore, or you find organizationally that you don't care about anymore. So just want to name that. But yeah, just reminder that the whole point here, the whole purpose of this session, but also our whole purpose in the month of July, is that these be low burden data collection. So I'm going to go into some specifics about that in just a moment. Okay. Starting off, this is also more words and information. This logic model last updated in 2023. That was included in session 1, so I'm not going to go into details. I find this useful context, and we highlighted here the outputs and the short-term outcomes. I think that sort of tracks with the data collection tools that I'm about to highlight in particular. Okay, so diving deeper into our grower employment program. So tool number 1, this is what we call our 52 skills database and our tracker. So we have, over the years, refined the number of, quote, hard skills that we track at the farm to 52 skills that we have very specific definitions for. That's pretty important to have to have the shared language, so that what introduced means for one person is the same across the board. It's hopefully pretty self-explanatory, but we have the categories, particular skills within that category, and as a care farm that deals with people with varying abilities, we have worked hard to break down skills into disparate parts so that one person might be totally independent on harvesting kale, which requires snapping the leaf off by hand, but may not be independent on using a harvest knife, which is very, very sharp. And so it's good to have that broken down. But I will say that these are very much farming specific skills at Red Wiggler. These are not necessarily general vocational skills. And that is something that we are discussing And I'll talk about that later when I get to the future slide. And yeah, here's an example too, just as attained level. Yeah, so this, going back to what Kate talked about, that progression checklist, this is how we do it at Red Wiggler. Just one way to do it. We have a skill that's been introduced. You achieve mastery, you achieve it. It's now expected. It's in your job description. You are expected to do that task. You may not be able to do it totally by yourself or without a team leader nearby, but you can do it with some support. Then you move on to independence. Then finally, you're a leader, you're a mentor or a coach for that skill. Okay. So that's skill one, tool one, which was, tracking those hard skills in our database. Tool number two, very simple. It is a daily observation log. And this is plucked out of Google, a shared Google form that staff can use to record what's going on. This is how we track those skills that I just went over. So specifically, this person was introduced to the skill of bunching today, or how they're progressing on their personal goals or their professional goals. And also, this is important for day-to-day pattern and behavior recognition, because, we are an employer, we are a care farm, but we're like, the emphasis is on care. And so we're also, making sure that we're supporting our community, and during the busiest months of the year, we're keeping track of everybody's well-being at the farm. So it isn't just this person bunched kale today, but it was this person bunched kale today, and then they were really upset at lunchtime because of XYZ reason. And you can look at that over time and see those patterns of emotion and behavior that can be useful to support that person longer term. So then another nice thing too is that during the off season, we can look back at these. Oh yes, sorry, I just saw the question pop up. We do, yes. The beauty of tabs in Google. And I want to say too, I'm happy to go more deeply into the structure of, I guess, organizational structure and how we find the time to do this for 17 people or 16 people, because that's a lot of administrative work. And I can certainly talk about that later, because maybe you have 3 growers at your farm, or 3 staff members that you might want to do this to support, which feels manageable. Or maybe you have 40. And so, it may not map perfectly onto your system. But I just want to highlight here in this log, this is a real person and their goal for the year. So one of their goals was about getting introduced to one of our walking tractors. And then the notes themselves, I bolded the thing about the goal, so you can note that progression on the goal. And then there's also different notes about other skills they worked on, other things. So it does not have to be a paragraph for each. It can be, this person did this today. That's it. All right. Okay, another very simple tool, and I think this is a good example of Kate talked about conversations and check-ins. And actually, I took some notes because, again, I want to be improving our systems too all the time. So all of our grower staff members at the farm have a manager, just like at any workplace, and their manager is responsible for facilitating these check-ins. They happen at least twice per growing season. So at the beginning of the season, at the end of the season, and then ongoing throughout in more informal ways. And we also try to do a mid-season when the month of July allows us. But we don't necessarily beat ourselves up if we don't get to it. But this is how it looks. It's really straightforward. It is, how are you feeling at the end of the day? What are you proud of? What's challenging for you? Do you need something? What are you excited about? pointing out who's also doing great. I think, it's nice to be able to give kudos to the whole team and sort of strengthen that community feeling, and then checking in on goals and adjusting goals if needed. Hey, that goal we set back in April was really ambitious. Because like we've only had thunderstorms on the days I've worked and I haven't gotten to practice weed whacking or something. And the idea behind these check-ins is that they're really flexible based on the individual. So if you have someone that's, I support a few people that are less verbal or, have great writing skills, but may not have great verbal communication skills. And so sharing this information ahead of time, keeping the questions consistent, all of those things are important. Having a facilitator as part of the conversation, just keeping the questions consistent, but changing up maybe how we ask them based on the individual and their own mode of their own needs and their mode of communication. And the last tool I'm just going to highlight for our grower program is this, again, very simple job satisfaction survey, which we do at the end of the season, around November. I don't necessarily stand behind this tool, but we do it. And so we have data for it over years, which is great. And this is something that I'm personally looking into adjusting or improving, but it is anonymous. And what we find helpful about it is that it's good for pattern recognition across the program participants as opposed to identifying an issue with an individual. Because we're trying to see in general, are people happy? Are they fulfilled? This doesn't always give us the data we want, but this is the tool that we've been using. And so sometimes that's the best you can do. It's flexible. Okay, so how this all fits together. We follow a pretty seasonal cycle. Being on the East Coast, our growing season is, peaks around this time. So we try to keep our July responsibilities pretty limited in theory, but we, over the years, have also determined that those are the times that we actually really need to intentionally set aside meeting time, administrative time. And so in April and May, I mentioned we have those one-on-one check-ins between managers and grower staff to brainstorm goals, finalize them, work on them, sort of pick up the baton from the previous season. Oh, you did really well with using the mower or using the shuffle hoe. Let's pick that up because you were so close to getting to independent on that. So we finalize the goals and they're set and they're in that log that I showed. In July, we have a meeting, the managers sit down and check in with each other, as well as casually our people talk about goal progress, skill development, and adjust as needed. This is important. The last 2 years, we have looked ahead to this time of year, knowing that we need to have this big meeting and we want to come at this meeting, with a little bit more space in our July brains. So we have been building in a programming and administrative break, almost like a professional development day when you're in school. So we're still figuring out and kind of right-sizing what works best for the community and our people. We did really well this year because it was in the middle of that nasty heat wave around the 4th of July. So go us. So that has been a game changer to make it lower burden to make this happen. And we've learned if you stick a meeting on a calendar 3 months in advance, like you honor it as opposed to trying to shoehorn it in the middle of the peak of the season. Towards the end of the season, October and November, we'll have that final one-on-one check-in, talk through kind of winter and what that's going to look like. And then the managers once again meet for a final skill development update. And then throughout the season ongoing, we have the note-taking on the skills and just observations, set an alarm. Actually, literally, as I was taking the mic from Kate, my alarm went off to take notes. Forgot to turn that off. But set an alarm, make it a habit. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't. Accountability with fellow staff members. Some gentle shaming helps sometimes. And then yeah, informal check-ins. And whatever that looks like for your person. I think, hold yourself to at least two, sit down, follow the questions, 2 per season. And then in between, some of your people really want to talk all the time. So you're having check-ins with them basically every day. Other people are like smooth sailing, cool cucumbers, don't really need to talk that much, don't love having meetings at all. Maybe in their lives, in their personal lives, they're always being asked those questions and they just like want to do their job, and that's fine. So I think a big lesson here really is just flexibility. Yeah. More examples of goals. So I showed that in the daily observation log, because we sort of we shrink this down and put it into the daily observation log to keep everyone's goals fresh. But yeah, here is, again, how we track goals in Google. We have different categories, and just note that as of this year, we're working more towards using I statements for the goal. I think really, whenever possible, for them to be as independently, coming from the person, and are not mapped on by a manager, not told, as best we can. But going back to shaping a life of one's own design, choosing your own goals is a big part of that. So these are smart-ish goals. So successful, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound. So how are they going to be successful? What action steps are there? Oh, look, we have a May 29th goal setting status. Accountability for ourselves. Did we get them set by the end of May? Mid-season status, been mid-July. Do we need to make any adjustments? Have people even gotten opportunities to practice this? And so having these little checkpoints along the season to keep ourselves accountable is really important. And this is not coming from funders. This is not coming from our grants. They're not asking us, oh, did you all meet in July to talk about goals? No, this is ourselves knowing that if we don't have this structure in place, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't. So yeah, honoring those times is really critical. And a takeaway here too is that these goals, don't just set goals for goals' sake. And don't just invent goals for people that they can achieve because it looks good to funders or it feels good. We've done that before. It doesn't feel awesome. So it's really moving towards an intention of what goal here will make someone feel the most satisfied and content and have the most well-being when they're at work, and help them most in their life moving forward. That's the hope. So yeah, a couple things, what's feasible to collect here, as I've just gone over, with our current capacity, intake forms, those seasonal or really brief or informal check-ins, simple observation logs, and just like who's here, some of those outputs, bean counting. The data visualization can come later. We are not doing super fancy pre and post assessments. I could have a whole other 10 slides about our community engagement program and surveying there and what's worked and what hasn't worked, but it's hard. It's hard. We're not doing longitudinal tracking, with the exception of maybe, looking at historical individual behavioral data occasionally. We're not doing control or comparison groups. So we're really trying to keep it simple and low burden. We're also collecting a lot of kale. That's feasible for us in the picture. And so lastly, where we're going. Whenever I talk about this, I always get in my head a little bit about our data at Red Wiggler, because we've been around, this is our 30th season. We've done so much over the years, and we have so much data, and it's overwhelming, and I can get kind of lost in that. And so I just want to just say that, you can do it for a long time and still always be adapting and figuring it out, and that's okay. But we've made some exciting changes this current season. So I mentioned that we have this manager system and different teams. We have a farm production team, community engagement team, and distribution team with a manager for each and about 5 or 6 grower staff underneath the manager in addition to other seasonal staff. And so we're trying to make systems here that are true across the board for all part-time staff, not just grower program participants. I think in the hope that we're not othering growers. And in fact, everyone has the same job titles as neurotypical staff members too, so that this is a direction we're moving in. To call it back to Airtable and something as simple as an iPad, this spring we decided to just bite the bullet and buy a few more refurbished old iPads to have around. And the difference that it's made in terms of being able to directly input administrative data into a tablet that then gets sent to either Google or Airtable is pretty awesome. We've cut out this middle step of administrative logging in terms of distribution data, in terms of volunteer hours. And a few years ago we did the same thing with clocking in and out for our grower staff, and that's just been awesome. And so I'm not a tech evangelist by any means, but I do think that when you're thinking about your capacity at the busiest time of the season right now, reducing that paper step or taking this information and putting it over here, reducing that step is a game changer and has helped a lot with not spending a million hours on things you don't want to be. And finally, I think the most important thing is that bringing it all the way back to our refreshed mission, vision, impact statement, we are in the process of broadening what we measure, sort of what outcomes we're measuring here, and moving away from limiting ourselves to only the hard skills that are unfortunately or fortunately much easier to track, moving towards something that is more expansive with well-being and belonging. So we're still figuring out how that looks, and this is our big project right now. But here's just an example of someone who has worked at the farm for a very long time, frankly, has struggled to figure out what new hard farming skill they're interested in doing. They know what they like, they know what makes them happy, they know what makes them feel good. And this year we decided, okay, your goal is going to be do the thing that makes you feel good here. And anecdotally, this person has had a much more smooth, sort of emotionally smooth season, because we've expanded what we've expanded what we think is worth tracking for this person. And so we're going to move in that direction. And I think if you have a spectrum of individuals that you support or you work with, some of whom are hungry for skill development, could go work on more farms, want to own their farm one day, want to learn how to drive the tractor, that's amazing. Keep tracking that. And that's pretty straightforward and measurable. The murkier stuff are the folks that are maybe getting older, or maybe losing some of the skills they used to have. So what's worth tracking there? What's going to keep them feeling like they're shaping a life of their own design and feeling like they're still part of the community, even though they may not be as productive as they used to be. So just food for thought. And I'll stop there and pass the mic back to Kate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Becca. As we kind of wrap up here, just pulled this again from session 1 because I think it's worth reiterating that really what we're trying to get across is that the best reason to measure is not to report, it's to improve and to show yourselves whatever you're deeming to be the most important. So you're doing more of it, not necessarily always changing things, but could involve change too. Um, just remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, this whole session is about how do you do this without feeling overwhelmed? And we tell people start small. Could be many people on this call today who are doing wonderful data collection. But if that's not you, don't worry. Just start with something. And, choose one or two things that you want to track and start there. As we're wrapping up, I will note again that we have some toolkit handouts that when you receive this slide presentation and click this button, you're going to have some downloads that will help summarize what some of our slides, methodologies, and tools are. So look forward to those. And we will also welcome any registrants for session 3. Share this out after. And I'm going to ask Andrea to also launch a very short Zoom poll. In the spirit of collecting data, we want to know if when you take time out of your day and attend something like this, if you actually find it helpful or if we could be doing something better. This is our way of just capturing some of that for our own use. I want to thank everybody today who was part of this. I have not been monitoring chat. Do we have any questions in chat with about 3 minutes left and we will leave this Zoom poll up? Anyone got a question? I'm not. Oh, here's one question. Hi, Carly. Question is, how do you manage working alongside employees, tracking data, and getting the farm work done? How many managers to employees? And do you work one-on-one with employees or are they doing a lot of group or independent work? Becca.
Wow, what excellent, very excellent question. Yeah, I did mention I would talk a bit more about organizational structure. So currently we have 3 manager level folks who do a mixture of farming and just off or non-farming sort of administrative and managing work. Then we have a bunch of leads who are really their job is to lead teams, both volunteers and growers, and like get the farming work and the distribution work done. And then we have a whole pool of folks doing the work themselves, be it growers, volunteers, random groups that come. And so, yeah, it's and we've arrived at this structure over a long time. And so ratio wise, usually groups are working anywhere from pairs to groups of 10, depending on, if we're harvesting cucumbers in July, we might send a ton of people to that team. And so the ability to like observe and monitor someone is not always easy, especially when you have huge teams of people. And I would say that the pendulum or the scale of the work needing to get done and the management and observations and the data, it's always this, always. And again, I bring it back to those structures that you put in place ahead of time. Like we honor the 3:30 p.m. note-taking time every day or something like that. We honor the meeting that we have. We hold each other accountable sort of as a cultural, organizational culture. Because otherwise we're all just going to want to farm because that's what we like to do. It's hard. Sometimes I have to drag myself away, but I know it's important. So yeah, I'm more than happy, Carly, to talk offline. We probably have already about the structure and go into the nuts and bolts of like how we get the work done. Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Hey, I just want to thank you again, Becca, for coming and sharing today. Thanks to everyone who attended. Hope you learned something that was helpful. Hope to see you at the next session, which is really going to be about taking this data and externalizing it and sharing the incredible work of care farms. We talk about the benefits and that care farms work. We're going to use this data to actually talk to our varying audiences out there to prove it. So hope that we see you next week and look for the recording and these slides in your inbox. And everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day.